The air inside the Kremlin feels heavy, almost too thick to breathe. Torches flicker along the stone walls, throwing long shadows that move like restless ghosts. Servants whisper in distant halls, afraid to speak too loudly, afraid to disturb the storm building behind the throne room doors. A terrible silence hangs over Moscow tonight, the kind that arrives before history breaks. Inside the Tsar's private chamber, two figures stand facing each other, a father and a son. But this is not a simple family moment. This is the ruler of Russia, Ivan the Terrible, and his heir, Ivan Ivanovich, the one person meant to carry the future of the empire. For years, fear, grief, and paranoia have twisted the Tsar's heart. Tonight, all of it rises again. Outside these walls, Russia sees Ivan as a conqueror chosen by God. But inside these walls, power has swallowed his judgment, and love struggles to survive inside a mind filled with enemies. The young heir tries to calm him, tries to reach the father behind the crown. But something dangerous moves in the Tsar's eyes. One moment of anger will soon decide the fate of a dynasty. The air feels thick enough to swallow. It carries a mix of smoke from burning pine, melted tallow, cold stone, and something you cannot name. But you feel it anyway. Fear. Only a faint strip of fading daylight creeps through the narrow slits in the wooden walls. The rest of the room glows with the weak fire from a dying torch. Everything is soaked in a strange orange haze, like the whole chamber is trapped inside a jar of old, muddy light. This isn't the grand throne hall the world imagines when they think of Moscow's rulers. This is deeper, quieter, hidden. We are inside the Tsar's most private world, the place no visitor ever sees. Servants move in fast, nervous motions. Their hands shake as they adjust the heavy fur cloak on the shoulders of the one being prepared. The cloak is too large for him. He is young, his frame thin, his face pale from sleepless nights. His name is Ivan Ivanovich, heir to the Russian throne. And tonight he is being brought into his father's inner circle for reasons no one dares speak aloud. He does not know if he is here as a son, as a soldier, or as a sacrifice. In a world ruled by one man's moods, roles change without warning. From the outside, Russia looks unstoppable. A vast empire stretching across endless frozen lands, held together by the iron will of one ruler. Ivan IV, called Ivan Grozny, Ivan the Terrible, sits at its top. He commands armies, crushes enemies, and holds the lives of millions in his hands. But absolute power does something strange to the human mind. It twists reality. It feeds on obedience until it needs something stronger. And the place where the Tsar hides from the world is also the place where his darkest storms begin. Not in front of cheering crowds, but behind thick walls guarded by loyal men who speak little and see everything. This is not the story of battles or famous victories. This is the story of a home turned into a prison, and of a night that shattered a dynasty from the inside. A moment Russian history tried to bury, because to understand Ivan's fall, you must understand the world he built around himself, a world that controlled everyone near him, including his own blood. Inside the Tsar's inner fortress, nothing happens by accident. The hallways twist like a maze. Doors are thick enough to drown sound. Torches burn low to keep eyes dizzy and unsure. It is a place designed not for comfort, but for control. And tonight, that control begins to crack. The boy who stands in the center of the room tries to steady his breathing. He has lived most of his life under the shadow of his father's unpredictable temper. Some days, Ivan IV praises him as the future of Russia. Other days, he shouts at him for imagined betrayal. The son never knows which father he will face next. The empire sees Ivan the Terrible as a ruler chosen by God. His son sees him as a storm that never ends. While the servants finish their work, everyone avoids looking directly at the Tsar. He stands in the doorway, silent, wrapped in layers of black fur. His eyes glow the way embers do before a fire breaks out. No one speaks. No one breathes too loudly. His presence alone squeezes the room tighter. Power like his does not need words. Outside of these walls, Europe whispers about him. Some call him a genius of order. Others call him a madman. But none of them understand what absolute power does when it is allowed to grow without limits. It does not stay in the throne room. It spreads into the home, into the family, into the blood dot, and in this sealed world, on a cold night that still haunts Russia. A father and son step toward a moment from which neither will return the same. The servants step back and press themselves against the icy stone walls. As the Tsar walks farther into the chamber, his boots make no sound on the wooden floor, but everyone feels his presence like a weight on their chest. Ivan Ivanovich keeps his eyes lowered, trying not to tremble. He grew up learning how to stand tall, how to command troops, how to read the complicated laws of the Russian state. But none of that knowledge helps him now. In this room, he is not a soldier or a prince. He is a son trying to survive the mind of a father shaped by years of war, betrayal, and loss. Beyond these walls, the empire appears calm, but inside the palace, cracks run through every corridor. The Tsar's secret police, the Oprichniki, move like shadows across Moscow. They punish anyone suspected of disloyalty. They remove nobles, seize property, and carry messages wrapped in fear. Their black horses and black clothes have become symbols of terror. Ivan created this system to guard his throne, but it also trapped him inside a cage of his own making. Everywhere he looks, he sees enemies. Everywhere he listens, he hears doubt. And tonight, that doubt turns inward. Servants rush to close the door behind him. The thick wood shuts with a deep thud that sounds like a warning. The room grows smaller. Ivan the Terrible steps closer to his son, studying him with an expression that shifts like storm clouds. One moment it looks proud. The next moment it looks suspicious. The prince's heart beats faster. He knows this face too well. It is the look his father wears before he decides whether to praise someone or destroy them. In the silent space between them, old memories hang in the air. Ivan remembers the day his first wife, Anastasia, died. She was the only person who ever softened him, the only one who calmed the sharp edges of his temper. When she passed, something inside him fractured. Many believe her death changed him forever, turning his grief into rage, his doubt into cruelty. And though years have passed, the wound still bleeds. Sometimes he blames the nobles. Sometimes he blames God. But most often he blames himself. And self-blame, in a man like him, always becomes anger aimed at others. His son tries to speak, but the words die in his throat. Ivan steps closer, lowering his voice to a whisper that somehow feels louder than a shout. The prince cannot tell if his father is searching for comfort or searching for fault. He only knows one rule. Whatever the Tsar decides next, no one can challenge him. No ministers, no church leaders, no guards, not even family. A draft of cold air slips through the cracks of the wooden door, mixing with the torch smoke. The light flickers, stretching shadows across the walls. For a moment, it looks like the shadows themselves are watching. The young prince feels a chill run through his body, not from the temperature, but from the sense that this night is different from all the others. Something is coming, something he cannot stop. This palace, with its endless halls, secret corners, and silent guards, was built to protect the Tsar. But it also hides his fear. Ivan survived threats, invasions, and betrayals. Now his closest fear lives in front of him. The idea that even his own son might one day replace him, judge him, or fail him. Absolute rulers often fear their heirs more than their enemies. Ivan Ivanovich tries to lift his head, to show strength, but the weight of his father's stare holds him down. The Tsar's eyes burn with questions that no one can answer safely. And in a world where fear has more power than truth, the prince understands that this conversation is no longer between a father and son. It is between a ruler and the only person who shares his blood. The only person who might inherit not just his crown, but his demons. The seconds stretch. The tension tightens. And the walls of the chamber feel like they are leaning in, waiting for the first spark of a fire that will soon blaze out of control. The tension in the room thickens as Ivan IV begins to circle his son, not speaking at first. His footsteps echo softly, but every sound feels sharp. The prince keeps his eyes lowered, not out of weakness, but out of caution. One wrong glance could be taken as disrespect. That is how fragile things have become. Ivan the Terrible's thoughts twist like smoke. Years of war have pushed him into a space where loyalty feels like illusion. Every noble who once swore to protect him could be plotting behind closed doors. Every town that once cheered for him might now whisper against him. And when a ruler begins to mistrust the world outside, their fear turns toward the world inside. He studies his son, strong, intelligent, respected by the soldiers. A young man the people already admire. Maybe admire too much. The Tsar feels something dangerous rise in him. The fear of being replaced. Fear disguised as anger. Anger disguised as suspicion. The prince tries to speak, offering reassurance, but Ivan cuts him off. His words come fast, sharp, accusing. He questions his son's judgment. He questions his alliances. He even questions the prince's loyalty to Russia. None of it is fair, but fairness no longer exists in this room. Ivan Ivanovich feels his chest tighten. He wants to defend himself, but every answer might make things worse. His father's mood shifts quick as lightning. One moment heated, the next strangely calm. The prince realizes he is standing inside a storm, not of weather, but of a man's collapsing mind. Servants near the walls hold their breath. They have seen arguments before, but never one with this much silent danger. Tonight, something feels different, heavier. Final. The Tsar steps closer, invading his son's space. Their faces inches apart. The torchlight shakes between them. For a moment, neither speaks. It is the calm before breaking. And somewhere deep inside the palace, as if sensing what is coming, a cold wind rattles the wooden shutters, the kind of sound that warns of tragedy before it arrives. The silence between father and son stretches until it becomes painful. Ivan the Terrible's breath grows uneven, and his eyes glow with the same wild fire the nobles fear. The prince lifts his head just enough to meet his father's stare, hoping to calm him, hoping to remind him that they are family. But the moment their eyes connect, the Tsar's anger sharpens instead of easing. Ivan begins to accuse his son of weakening the state. He claims the prince interferes with military decisions, that he listens too closely to advisors, that he risks throwing Russia into chaos. These accusations come from nowhere, but the Tsar no longer separates truth from fear. His mind is crowded with old betrayals, real and imagined, until every shadow looks like an enemy. The prince steps forward, trying to explain himself. He speaks with emotion, maybe too much emotion. His words carry frustration, disappointment, and fear, feelings his father interprets as rebellion. The Tsar mistakes desperation for defiance. Ivan's rage snaps. He shouts that his son is ungrateful, that he wants to steal the throne, that even blood cannot be trusted. The prince, overwhelmed, finally raises his voice back. It is the first time in years he has spoken with such force. The clash of their voices fills the room like thunder. The servants freeze where they stand. No one dares interrupt. Everyone knows how quickly Ivan's fury can turn violent. And tonight it hangs over the room like a blade. The prince reaches out, not to challenge, but to plead. Yet the Tsar sees only threat. His hand moves to his staff, gripping it with a strength driven by fear and confusion, not reason. In that moment, a single heartbeat holds the weight of a dynasty, and then the breaking point arrives. The room seems to hold its breath as Ivan the Terrible tightens his grip on the staff. His face is twisted by fear, anger, and the painful belief that even his own blood might betray him. The prince steps forward again, not to challenge, but to calm him. He raises his hands in a gesture of peace, trying to show that he means no harm. But the Tsar no longer sees clearly. His mind is clouded by years of battle, distrust, and grief. He hears only defiance. He sees only threat. And in a flash of panic disguised as power, he raises the staff. The prince barely has time to react. The strike lands with a sharp crack that echoes through the chamber like the opening of a nightmare. Ivan Ivanovich falls to his knees, stunned, his hand pressed to his head. Blood begins to stain his fingers. The Tsar freezes, shocked by what he has done. But the moment is already too late. The servants gasp but remain silent, afraid to move. The prince looks up at his father, not with anger, but with heartbreak. His eyes fill with disbelief, sorrow, and the painful question no one dares speak aloud. Why? Ivan drops the staff. His face drains of color. He reaches for his son, suddenly desperate, suddenly human again. But the damage has already taken root. The prince collapses, breathing unsteadily, and the weight of what has happened crashes into the room like cold wind. The Tsar begins to shout for help, his voice cracking. But even as the guards rush inside, everyone can see the truth in the prince's fading eyes. A line has been crossed that can never be repaired. A moment of fear has destroyed the future of Russia. The chamber erupts into frantic movement as guards and attendants rush toward the fallen prince. Ivan the Terrible kneels beside his son, trembling, his hands hovering helplessly in the air. He tries to lift the prince's head, but his own fingers shake too violently to offer comfort. The man who once ruled with unbreakable confidence now looks terrified of his own strength. Ivan Ivanovich struggles to stay conscious. His breaths come unevenly, each one softer than the last. The wound on his head pulses with dark red, and his body weakens in his father's arms. He tries to speak, but the words fall apart before they reach his lips. The Tsar leans closer, desperate to hear any sign of forgiveness, but the prince can barely whisper. The servants avoid looking directly at their ruler. They know what this moment means. The heir to the Russian throne is slipping away, and no amount of power can undo what has been done. The Tsar's authority, which once seemed limitless, now feels like a curse closing in on him. Ivan calls for doctors, priests, anyone who might save his son. His voice is filled with panic, a sound almost no one in Russia has ever heard from him. But even as help arrives, every face in the room sees the truth. The prince's life is fading too quickly. A heavy stillness settles over the chamber, broken only by the shaky breaths of the dying heir and the frantic whispers of terrified servants. Ivan the Terrible holds his son close, trying to will him back to life. But the prince's eyes drift unfocused, his body growing weaker. The Tsar had feared losing control of the empire. Instead, he has lost the one person who carried his legacy, and the cold realization begins to creep into his mind. That this tragedy was not caused by enemies, traitors, or fate. It was caused by him. Hours pass, and the once loud chamber grows quiet. The prince lies on a low bed prepared by the servants, his breathing shallow, each breath weaker than the last. Ivan the Terrible does not leave his side. He kneels nearby, hands tangled in his own beard, eyes swollen from tears he never thought he could shed. The guards stand motionless at the walls, unsure whether they are witnessing a family tragedy or the collapse of a kingdom. Doctors work in silence, applying herbs and bandages, whispering prayers they hope can save the heir. But their faces show no hope. They can slow the bleeding, but they cannot undo the blow. The Tsar watches every movement, demanding answers, demanding miracles, demanding that someone take responsibility for something he himself caused. The prince finally opens his eyes. He looks at his father with a mix of pain and love, as if he is trying to comfort the very man who struck him. He reaches out a weak hand. Ivan grabs it tightly, tears spilling down his face. He whispers apologies, pleads for forgiveness, begs his son not to leave him. The prince's lips move, forming a soft sound, a gentle reply meant to ease his father's torment. Then his hand loosens. The room freezes. The doctors bow their heads. The future Tsar of Russia is gone. Ivan the Terrible lets out a cry that shakes the chamber. It is the sound of a ruler, a father, and a man whose own anger has destroyed the one person he needed most. The servants cling to the walls, terrified to witness such raw grief. Word spreads quietly through the palace. The heir has died, not from an enemy's blade, not from a foreign army, but from the Tsar's own hand. And with that truth, a deep shadow falls over Russia. Ivan the Terrible rises slowly, his face hollow. Power cannot protect him from what he feels now. His empire may fear him, but he fears himself. The palace falls into a heavy silence after the prince's death. Every hallway feels colder, every corner darker. Servants walk quietly, afraid to speak his name or mention the tragedy. They know that in a place ruled by fear, even grief can be dangerous. The Tsar's sorrow might turn to rage again, and no one wants to be caught in its path. Ivan the Terrible isolates himself, wandering through the fortress like a man haunted. He avoids the throne room. He avoids celebrations. He avoids anything that reminds him of the empire he built. Each step seems to echo the same truth. He has destroyed his own bloodline, the one hope for Russia's future. He visits the room where his son died and sits alone for long hours, staring at the empty bed. He remembers the kindness in the prince's voice, his loyalty, his potential. He remembers the moment he raised his hand in anger, and he cannot escape the realization that the greatest enemy he ever faced was not outside Russia's borders. It was his own uncontrolled power. Across the empire, people whisper about what happened. Some say the Tsar has lost the blessing of heaven. Others say God himself has turned away. Soldiers lose morale, nobles grow anxious, and the land begins to feel leaderless. Russia does not collapse that night, but a deep crack appears. A crack that future generations will feel. No one in the palace dares to comfort the Tsar. His grief is too large, his guilt too heavy. They watch from doorways as he moves through the shadows. A ruler who can command armies but cannot undo one moment of madness. When he finally returns to the throne, the strength in his voice is gone. The man who once inspired fear now looks smaller, older, broken from within. The prince's name fades from official records, but the story survives in whispers. It becomes a warning passed from one generation to the next, that absolute power is not protection, but a danger that grows quietly until it consumes everything. Even the people closest to you. History remembers Ivan as a fierce Tsar, a conqueror, a man of iron will. But it also remembers the night his anger shattered his own future. A night when a father struck a son, and the empire paid the price. And now the question remains: what other secrets lie buried behind palace walls? What other truths were covered to protect the powerful? Tell me what hidden stories you want to explore next, because history may be written by rulers, but the shadows always keep the rest.